welcome back to the channel. On this episode, we are installing our roof lining. So this is going to be another tutorial style video. I'm going to show you the steps required to get your roof lining in the car. In the last episode, we finished up with the roof all complete together and ready for installation. So first thing we're going to have to do in this is to get our bars fitted back to the pockets. So in the last episode, you may remember that we labeled each of the bars. So each of the bar has a stripe to correspond which pocket number it goes, going from 1, 2, 3, and so on. So I'm going to grab the corresponding bars, put them in the pockets, and we're going to get ready to fit this in. So keep an eye which one's front and which one's the back. You also want to remember that some of these bars may have a hook. As we see in the back here, we have a hook where the last bar attaches. So if you have any of those hooks, you want to make sure you cut the slot in the pocket now for them. Now I'm going to start from the front, putting the bars in. So if we look, we can see different points where the bars will attach to. So I'm going to be putting it in the far side first and then putting it in the close side. And as I put it in, I'm then going to twist the bar up to press against the roof to hold it in place. Once I've got a couple bars in place, I'm going to clamp the front to keep everything from falling back as I work towards the rear. And as I work all the way back, this last hook should hold the main body of the roof in place. So I'll stick it on the tripod and I'll get to work. So when we put this together, I've made these pockets a little oversized. So as you can see, we've got the entire bar hidden in the pockets. So we need to have the tips exposed. So I'm going to cut back about 1.5 inches either side of the pocket. And then once we've got it hanging, then we can trim back the pockets. As we're hanging this, we want to make sure that the front and the rear both have center marks, and our roof lining panels have our center marks as well. Because as we clamp it in place, we want to make sure we clamp the front and the rear with center lines marked. And from there, we can work out the rest. If you have interior lights like these, what I like to do is just set the screws just sticking out a bit, so that when we've got the bars and everything in place, you can just feel for the screws, and that gives you two very easy points to mark, identify, and cut. So I've got another light back here, and I've got screws in there just the same. So once the roof is in place, all I need to do is feel for those screws, mark it, and then cut between the two. And that will allow the interior lights to go back in place once the roof is installed. Now we've got the center pinned at the front, we've got the bar hooked in the center at the back. So when you start aligning our patterns, so if you've got a vinyl or plain style roof, this is a step that's not entirely critical for you. But for me, I need to get all my pattern lines to run true and straight. So that means grabbing the material and pulling it out. So as you can see, as I pull out, the roof starts sitting flat and neat. But if we look up here, I'm at the limit of the pocket to pull out any further. So if you need to adjust it further out and your pocket's doing that, you can cut it back a centimetre or two at a time. You ideally don't want to cut back behind this corner. You want it to just hook around the outside, and that will give it a bit of grip and a bit of stability to keep the tension hanging out at the top to get that nice even corner up the top there. So that's what I'm doing now. I'm going to align my pattern, cut the pockets where I need to, make sure I can get enough tension outwards. Because as we attach it and glue it around the seam on the outside, we're going to have to apply tension to keep everything looking neat. I've set up myself a string line just to help guide a straight line. It's not 100% perfect, but it's close enough for us to start. So, typical fashion, we're going to be applying some glue along the seals. These are little sections of seam with the multiple metal panels attached to. And on this one we have a seal or a pinch weld that goes on over top and clamps that down. Uses the pinch weld just like this. So after we glue in place, these go on after, at least in the rear and around the door areas, and that locks it all in place and finishes it off neatly. So I'm going to start by getting a paintbrush and putting contact adhesive just on the outside layer of this lip here. So I'm going to be putting it on all these lips around and around the windscreen. So by pre-gluing it and pre-gluing all of them, it makes life a little easier, because as we go around, we'll probably have to touch up areas as we get to it, but just having that initial glue base to it is going to make the process a lot quicker and easier. We can also start putting a light layer on the material itself. So we can pull this out and we can mark out pencil, chalk, whatever you're using, and just do about an inch strip layer of glue around the whole roof. So I'm going to set up my glue and get straight into it. Now the glue I'm using is going to be this Super Grip. It's a sprayable contact adhesive, but any contact adhesive will do the job quite nicely. So your Gorilla Grip, contact glue, whatever you want to call it, they all will work fine. This stuff does paint a lot nicer than the thick stuff, but you can use thinners to actually thin out the glue to make it a little bit easier to use. So to thin it, I like to use a toluene, and I find that thins it out quite well. So enough talk, I'm going to get into it and start gluing up all those panels. Alright, so I've I've got a base layer glue all around. So I've got it on the fabric and the panel itself. So what I'm going to do now, I can pull this out front and rear, stick in place, making sure I get the pattern even with the pull out. We don't want to get a bit of a zigzag snake going on with the pattern. So I'm going to pull center, pin it in center, front and back, and then we're going to go to the corners and we're going to pull out that way and we're going to come back at the same time, and we're going to just pin it like so. And once we got the center, then the corner, we then can work on the center, keeping eye on our pattern lines. If you've got vinyl, it doesn't matter as much, and all you need to do is make sure as you pull and wrap it around that everything is pulling even, because if you pull some parts tighter than others, you'll get a high than low spots. So you want to pull with even pressure. So using that exact technique on the front and rear. This is the time you want to try get your pattern even if you're using a patterned material as your roof lining. So as we're gluing it to the side, we need to make sure that we're pulling even tension outwards, because you do not want to start getting zigzags and S's in the side as your pattern any more than what is necessary. So I'm going back and forth and looking down the lines through the back just to make sure everything is aligning as best as I can. You also, as you glue up these sections, you want to make sure you are gluing on the outside only of those little lips, because if you start gluing on the inside of those lips, you'll find as you put the pinch weld windows and everything back together, you will start getting some uneven pulling. So you want to make sure the gluing stays on the outside of the lips. We're a couple panels into it now, but in the middle here we're going to have to change it up a little bit because there's nothing to hook over. Keeping an eye on the pattern, the lines on the pattern, we need to pull this across this B-pillar so that it flows at a relatively consistent rate. So I've done that one over there. Not 100% perfect, but you do as good as you can make it. So I'm just, I've got my glue, I've glued a straight line. You want to try glue as straight as you can across there, because if you glue uneven and press down, you glue in the unevenness to the roof itself. So if you glue nice and even, pull nice and even, you'll get an even finish. So I'll pull that down, stick it to it, and then I can follow through. And as I get here, I will need to put a nice even strip glue across here as well. And the same on all the pillars. These corners here, they can be quite a bit tricky to get it to sit and wrap around, but with the right techniques you can cut about a centimetre or ½ inch away from the edge of the lip, and then we can cut into just a couple millimeters away from the edge of the lip. Once we've done that, it allows us to stick our thumb behind and wrap it around the edge just like so. And that's how we secure. So these sections here I've glued on the face, around and all the way up there. So these are going to have a panel that's set up and stop around the top there. I've got to repeat this process of doing these corners to all these sections here. So this here is going to have to wait to last, as is the back. I still need to fill in this section here. Still need to pull across tight. As you can see, it's not exactly even back there yet. And once these little corners are done, we can look at what needs to be done around here. Let's take a look on how far we've come. You'll see we still have this corner and this corner hanging, but all the other ones should be done. So I've left these ones so I can run over them with you. I've glued in underneath, trying to draw somewhat of a straight line from this point, drawing across and back again. So that's kind of what I was attempting to do. So now this here is done and the back is done. I can grab this, aiming for the center of that bend there. Very directed approach. You can see it starts pulling tension back to the seam. Still trying to aim to get the pattern as straight as we can and kind of guide the fabric into the deepest part of the corner. And we can pull the rest of the cover around, trying to keep all surfaces as flat as we can make them. And then with our finger, we can draw a line across. Working the material onto the lip. So as you work it in, it's going to get tighter and tighter to the point where right in the corner is almost as tight as a drum. It's got a few wrinkles there. Might get a bit close, so we can grab just below it and pull down and out. Try to work them out. Most of this should be covered, so whatever wrinkles are left shouldn't hurt. So that corner's now in place. You can see I've already done it over here as well. So now that's in, we can put a little bit more glue in this section. I'll probably re-glue this section here. We've got our glue in this corner now. So we can trim off the excess we don't need. Then we can notch into the corner, allowing us to wrap it around. So now that corner is going to hold very strong. What we also need to do is cut off this excess material, because we don't need all that. Once you've cut off the excess, I can cut the excess over here as well. It's always like using these little snips for cutting into the corner. You cut much more accurate. So now that corner is all done. Now the back is done. We can now take a look at the front corner. So this is a very similar process. So I've drawn my approximation of a straight line with the glue. I'm going to stick my finger in to the corner and push down to the deepest part of the corner. So it's pinned in place. And then I can draw a line with my finger, pulling it back here. Now I can work over here, back into the deep section. Now to help assist getting into the corner, you can use particular tools to get in there. I'm just going to use the handle of a new paintbrush. So it's got a small point, and it hasn't got any sharp edges where it's going to penetrate the material. And that'll allow you to work it nice and deep into there. So now that corner is in place, we can cut off excess material, just like we did over there. And then we can trim this back, notch our corner and wrap it around, and the same on the front. And that's the finished product of the corner. So at this stage, everything's wrapped securely. Take a look inside. The pattern is pretty straight. It's never going to be 100% perfect, but it's looking pretty good to me. It's a pretty outrageous pattern to have on your roof, and there's a lot going on, so it takes a bit of a personality to want this kind of roof, but I'm liking it, and I think it's going to suit the build quite well. So from here, we can cut off all our excess materials that's just dangling down, and we can also go in, there's lots of little straggly bits hanging down, we can clean all of them off. And we can also add little pieces of scrap pinch weld just to all these lips, because if it's going to sit for a period of time without the windows, without the ceiling that goes around the inner doors, the adhesive can wear away over time. It's more common if you use a vinyl. The vinyl keeps its elasticity for quite some time, and we'll be trying to pull back in. These here, there isn't a whole heap of tension, and they tend to keep the shape, so it should hold. But I'm going to be using some old pinch weld that I pulled off these doors, so I'm changing them from a grey to a black. So I'm going to use some of the old stuff just to put it in the corners and put it spaced out around just to prevent it from peeling off. So it's going to be a bit of time before the windows go back in. So I want to make sure that all the work we've done today doesn't undo itself. So I'm going to do that, and then I'll show you what's next. The excess has been removed, and once it's all pretty much together, when you start looking at putting things back on the roof, so we've got our interior lights, a rear view mirror, sun visors, rear view mirror, they won't go back on until the window is in place. But our interior lights, we've also got brackets and hinges down the back we can put in. Now for now, we'll just focus on the interior lights. So if you remember earlier, we left some screws in place so we can easily find where we have to cut. So if you can see, we've got an indent of where our screws are. So we know we have to cut between these two marks. So using a pencil like this or a piece of chalk, we can identify where we need to cut. So we've got that interior light, and the process is exactly the same for any other one. So if you've got the screws in there, just mark the two, cut between them, cut a little circle for the light, being careful not to cut oversized, and then you can plug in the light and mount it up. Now if you didn't put those screws in, it does make it slightly harder, but it's not too difficult. So you might be able to see I've put a couple marks there. That is the marks of where the sun visor attaches. Now I've had to do that because I didn't put a screw there. It's a good example to show you of what to do if this is the case. Now in the center there's usually a rear view mirror, and you can feel around, and often in the center of the rear view mirror there is a hole in the panel. Now that marks the center. So there's no screw that goes in there, it's just a recess that allows the rear view mirror to go in place. But it gives you a center location. You can feel around it. My rear view mirror in particular has 3 screws. So there's one there, and then I can feel out, and I found another screw hole just there. So it's just a matter of feeling. If you've got a vinyl, it's a little more trickier to find them, but you can still do it. It just takes a bit of patience, a little bit of fiddling around, and you can find it. You can also use a small skewer or a pin. Once you find the hole in the middle, that one's bigger and easier to find. You can put a pin and kind of feel inside and around for any surrounding holes. So next to here, we'll feel around. There should be a clip that catches the sun visor. I think that might be it there. Yeah. So we've got one here, and there'll be a hole behind it that has a little guide tab. And that's how we find these holes when we don't have the screws in place. So it's a lot easier if you don't have to do this, but if you do, it's not the end of the world and you can work around it. You also got to be aware that there are holes in the panel that don't necessarily have a use. So there's a hole right here, but there is no need for it, so we're not going to punch it. So it's a good idea to have the pieces you need to put back in to make sure the holes you're about to punch are correct for the piece. So this roof lining is pretty much done. Let's take a look around and see our work. So obviously we still need to do the pillars. This originally had a cover. It was a cardboard composite cover that went from about this height down. Same over there, but it was an ugly color and the condition was pretty poor, so I won't be reusing that. I'm going to be wrapping all this in vinyl and foam. Now let's take a look at what we've achieved. So still got a lump right here, as there's another light to install yet. But ignoring that, the roof is looking awesome. It's very, very loud style roof, but I'm liking it. It's got a very, very loud color paint as well, so this car is going to stand out. So all this fluff and dust that's collected on the roof, usually you can get a roll tack cloth from like a clothing store that's meant to remove lint, and that's great for removing that stuff. Compressed air can also do it, and I think even sometimes you can get away using a tack cloth. So if you guys have any comments, questions, whatever, post them below in the comments section. And that's going to be it for this episode. And the next time I see you, we're going to be finishing off these pillars. We're going to be wrapping them in a vinyl, making it all look nice. So we'll see you next time on Sam's Project Bench. Bye.